You know, some stories are so vast, so epic, they almost defy explanation. They're these incredible tales of power, of faith, of genius, and eventually of collapse that just echo through time. Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest of them all, the story of the Ottoman Empire. Just think about that for a second. This isn't just some line from a dusty history book. It's the opening scene of an absolute epic. We're talking about a single, tiny spark in Anatolia that grew into a firestorm, literally reshaping the world map and the entire course of human history. All right, so how does that even happen? How does a small, frontier tribe become a world-spanning empire? Well, it starts not with an army, but with an idea, and a leader who could actually make that idea a reality. Now, let's talk about the founder, Osman I. What's so fascinating about this guy is that his real power wasn't just brute force. No, he was a master of psychology. He just got it. He understood that to survive, surrounded by enemies, you need way more than swords. You need unity. You need a shared purpose, a belief in something bigger than yourselves. That right there, that was his genius. So here's the entire journey we're about to take, laid out in 4 critical moments. From its humble beginning to a world-changing conquest, its magnificent peak, and its eventual final end. This is our roadmap. Every empire has that one moment that truly defines it, right? A point of no return where it just transforms into something else entirely. For the Ottomans, that moment was a single, absolutely earth-shattering conquest. The year is 1453, and the target? The legendary city of Constantinople. We're talking about the 1,000-year-old heart of the Byzantine Empire, a city that everyone, and I mean everyone, thought was impenetrable. This was the turning point. Sultan Mehmed II brought in these massive cannons, a truly terrifying new technology, and he did the impossible. He broke through those legendary walls. And in that moment, you could argue the medieval world ended, and a whole new age began. So here's the crucial takeaway. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just another victory. It was a declaration. It was the Ottomans announcing to the world that they were no longer just a regional power. They were a global superpower, and they now controlled the gateway between Europe and Asia. They were here to stay. So with that kind of power secured, the empire entered its golden age. This was a time of just unparalleled strength, wealth, and cultural brilliance, all defined by one legendary ruler. Under Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire reached its absolute zenith. They called him the lawgiver because he rewrote the book on legal reforms. But his influence was everywhere. You can still see it in the breathtaking architecture, in the huge advancements in science, and in this incredible flourishing of arts and culture across the empire. And you just have to appreciate the scale of this thing. From the gates of Vienna in the west, all the way to the Persian Gulf in the east, their shadows stretched across the known world. This was a domain of staggering size and diversity, all run from the grand capital of Istanbul, formerly Constantinople. But, well, history always teaches us a hard lesson, doesn't it? What rises must eventually fall. And for the Ottoman Empire, the seeds of its own decline were actually sown at the very height of its power. It's like a fundamental law of power. The bigger you get, the more threats you face. Not just from the outside, but even more dangerously, from within. The very success of the empire created the exact conditions for its own eventual downfall. And soon, the cracks began to show. Internally, you had systemic corruption just hollowing out the government, while rebellions were constantly straining resources. Externally, you had newly energized European powers starting to compete, challenging Ottoman trade routes, challenging their territories. And maybe most critically, the military that once terrified Europe began to stagnate. The once elite janissaries, they became more of a political class, resisting the very reforms needed to keep up. The engine of conquest had just stalled out. So for centuries, the empire weakened in this slow, painful decline. But it was the cataclysm of the First World War that delivered the final, decisive blow, shattering everything that was left of the old order. In 1922, after more than 600 years, the Ottoman Sultanate was officially abolished. The great empire that had once terrified and dazzled the world was, well, it was no more. But the story doesn't really end there, does it? Because when an empire of this scale vanishes, it leaves behind a legacy that continues to shape our modern world in some profound ways, and it asks us some very difficult questions. This is the question the Ottoman story forces all of us to confront. We see this pattern again and again throughout history. A rapid rise, a golden age, and then a slow, complex decay. Is this just an inevitable cycle for all great powers? Ultimately, the 600-year story of the Ottoman Empire is a powerful, timeless warning. It's a reminder that no power is permanent and that the forces of history are just so much larger than any single ruler or nation or empire. Their story never really dies. It just becomes a lesson for the future. If you find these deep dives into history, power, and the cycles of civilization as fascinating as I do, then be sure to like and subscribe to Mindscapes by Faizu for more deep history and mind-bending insights. Thanks for watching.